One of the biggest storylines to open this college football season has been South Florida's historic start to the season. They opened the year on a Thursday against last season's Group of 5 playoff team in Boise State, a top 25 opponent, and they blow the doors off of them. And that alone would have been really nice. But then a week later, they go on the road into the swamp and pull out the 18-16 victory over Florida. You can make the complaints about the play calling and say Florida lost for any number of reasons, but at the end of the day, that is one of the most impressive Group of 5 resumes we've seen to start the season in the modern era. That is extremely impressive. Like, the only other team I can think of that, even through 2 games, had a better looking resume was the Cincinnati team that ended up making the 4-team playoff because they got that signature win over Notre Dame. And now South Florida, a golden opportunity even beyond that. They've got a road game at Miami that could even bolster the resume further. And so South Florida is being talked about plenty, but there's an underrated storyline here that I don't think is being talked about, and that is the 2-bid American Conference. That's right, 2 bids from a Group of 5 conference, the SEC and Big Ten's worst nightmare, but I think it's a lot more feasible and realistic than some people are willing to admit it is. Let's start by looking at some of the other contenders that the American Conference has, because they do have other contenders. You've got Navy, Memphis, North Texas, Tulane, and Temple, all teams that have gotten off to a decent start to the season. In fact, all of those teams are 2-0 thus far in the season, and all of those teams I think are relatively on the radar. Probably not Temple as much, or North Texas really, but really the 3 I'm talking about here are Memphis, Tulane, and Navy. But the other 2 will include just for funsies because they're also undefeated, so it's fun to talk about. All the teams 2-0, as I said. If you look at the notable wins, none of them has too crazy of a win. Tulane does have the win over Northwestern, a not very good Big Ten team, but it is still a power conference win, and it's worth something because of how much they dominated. Even if Northwestern only wins a couple of Big Ten games, that's something for Tulane to flex this year. But you look at the upcoming big games that these teams have. Navy has a road trip in November to play Notre Dame. North Texas plays Washington State, which is sort of a pseudo-power conference team. Could be worth something if North Texas has a really successful year. Memphis actually plays host to Arkansas. Temple plays host to Oklahoma this week. And Tulane plays host to Duke this week. So some big-time home games, and then Tulane also has to go on the road versus Ole Miss. So a big opportunity for a lot of these teams to also build really compelling resumes. And it would be near impossible for all of these teams to go through and win these big games. But even if just 1 or 2, and the right 1 or 2, like if Memphis beats Arkansas and can build a solid 11-1, they end up actually playing South Florida this year, so maybe the loss is to South Florida. That's arguably a top 15 resume. And then there's Tulane. If Tulane can even go 2-1, maybe with a close loss to Ole Miss, they don't even play South Florida. So maybe they could be 11-1. There is some real traction to be gained here by the American Conference and real noise to be made for a 2-bid league, which is pretty crazy to talk about. Typically, it's the ACC and Big 12 that are in such conversations, but because of the start South Florida has had and the position some of these other teams are in, there's other conversations to be had. Another thing that I think sort of opens the door a little this year is if you look at the other Group of 5 contenders this year, you've got some notable ones. UCLA is probably the biggest threat to the 2-bid American Conference this year, and that's because UNLV is 3-0 on the season. They have a win over a power conference team in UCLA, and on their schedule, they don't have anything too daunting. They do play Boise State. The cannibalization could be there, but you look at Boise State, one of the top contenders in the team that did grab the bid last year. They already have a head-to-head loss to the American Conference. So whoever comes out on top of the American is likely going to be favored over Boise State. Toledo just got a dominant win over Western Kentucky. Could have been a threat in those conversations, but they lost versus Kentucky. And then Texas State has the win over UTSA. That could be a threat to them. They're 2-0, but Rice has a road win against Louisiana. So if Louisiana is at all competitive in the Sun Belt this year, then the American's going to have the advantage on them as well. You can see there's some big upcoming games. Boise plays Notre Dame. Texas State plays Arizona State still. Louisiana plays Missouri. So some other ways to do some measuring up, and maybe some of those conferences get notable wins. But right now, the American as a whole, as a conference, has a lot better resume and a lot more opportunities to build upon their resume. The other thing that has been a major factor in this is the bids are going to be there. The Big 12 as a conference has flopped so far. You look at all of the big opportunities that the Big 12 has had to open the season. It started in week 1. They had Baylor losing their big game. Colorado fell to Georgia Tech, and Cincinnati lost to Nebraska. And then in week 2, it was a lot more of the same story. Any real opportunity to notch a big win, they kind of folded, and they even lost some games where you felt like they can't lose this game, like ASU falling to Mississippi State, West Virginia to Ohio, Kansas State to Army. some really bad losses in there. Iowa State and Baylor do get a couple nice ones early. There's still some contenders like BYU, Utah, TCU have looked fine thus far in the Big 12 and even really good. But overall, the Big 12 has flopped pretty bad in the non-conference to the point where there are bids on the table to be had. It's not like the Big 12 is performing super, super well. Additionally, there's some precedent for group of five respect from the committee. I know the overall narrative is that the committee doesn't respect them, but I actually thought they showed quite a bit of respect to the group of five last year in the rankings. There were 4 ranked teams from the group of five at the end of last year, with Boise State, UNLV, Army, and Memphis all getting in there, which is interesting to see that. And the respect that was there made it to where we almost got a 2-bid group of 5 team last year. And I don't think many people realize this. Boise State was 9th. And the committee showed they weren't going to drop teams very much for losing in the conference title game. Even if Boise State lost to UNLV, there's a chance the Broncos don't drop all the way out. And then UNLV's the auto bid, and they're in as the 12 seed. We almost got 2 group of 5 teams in the playoff last year from the Mountain West. And so it could come down to that. If you talk about the American, it is a bit of a stretch to get 2 teams in, both in the at-large category, or both teams that would have been in regardless of the outcome in the conference title game. But for the American, the real storyline here that could get them 2 bids the easiest is going to be the conference title game route. That route I'm talking about is, for example, let's look at this one. Let's say Tulane goes 10-2. They lose a game to Ole Miss, close game in the regular season, and then they win out. Maybe they lose one fluky conference game, and South Florida goes undefeated, or maybe they go 11-1 with a loss to Miami. So South Florida is the number 7 team in the country. Tulane's number 21. In the American Conference title game, a Tulane win would virtually guarantee 2 bids for the American Conference. Precedent has shown us that they're not really going to punish you all that much for a loss in conference championship weekend, and even if South Florida loses, let's say by double digits, I really don't think it's likely they drop them, especially because South Florida has that win over Florida. And if that's done, Tulane gets in as the 5th highest ranked conference champion. South Florida's already in, and just like that, you've got a 2-bid American Conference. And for that reason, I think this is super realistic. This is super doable for the American Conference this year. This will no doubt outrage some of the power conference commissioners and powers that be, but I think this is what it's all about. I think the system needs to be modular, and it needs to be something that can adapt year to year, because the American Conference has some really good teams this year, and they have teams that are deserving. So I think if you don't have a playoff system that's going to respect these teams and going to be flexible and going to allow for this to happen in a year where the conference is playing good games and having a good year, then what is even the point of a playoff system if it just serves to prop up a couple conferences automatically? But that does it for this video. Just a fun concept I wanted to talk about for a little bit, the 2-bid American Conference. Tell your friends about it and definitely root for this outcome, because it would be very fun and I'd be good for the sport, even if it means the SEC and Big Ten would rush into their plans to expand the playoff and add all these auto bids and things like that. Would be a little bit of a mess, but would at least be fun, because I think that's the direction we're going pretty much regardless of what happens. So it would just be fun to see that in the meantime. But let me know down in the comments what you've thought of the season so far. It's been a pretty unpredictable year and a pretty fun year to track overall. If you're not already in the CF Budge Discord, I'll link that down below. It's a fun place to go talk, especially on game day. That's all I got for this video. I will see you guys later this week.